Good day, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Analyst Conference at Bechtle AG in 2021. I'm Martin Link, and together with the chairman of the board, Dr. Thomas Olemotz, I'm here to welcome you. It's Friday afternoon, 2 o'clock. Everyone is ready for the weekend. Welcome to all of you. You're at the right meeting here because we have good figures to present. And if anything, we're only going to pour a little bit of water into the wine. I'm sure you've cast a glance to the figures this morning. Dr. Olemotz is going to introduce further details. And as regards the Q&A session, I'd like to ask you to raise your hands in teams, and then we know that you want to ask questions. If you're only linked in via phone, you get a separate opportunity after we concluded the Teams session, but I'll inform you once we get there. So I'd like to hand over to Dr. Thomas Olemotz.
Thank you, Mr. Link. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to welcome you as well this afternoon to our Analyst conference on our financial year at Bechtle AG in 2020. I'm very happy to see that so many of you feel interested in it, and I can already tell you that we are not going to disappoint you in terms of our financials. Unfortunately, just like last year, we cannot meet in person. COVID-19 has been ruling our lives for more than 12 months now, but for most of us, video conferences have become a daily routine, even though our enthusiasm over this fact has waned over time. Martin Link has said it. It is our pleasure to also welcome our international investors at this Analyst conference. For the first time, this conference is being interpreted simultaneously into English, and during the following Q&A session, you can ask your questions in either German or English. So welcome to everybody. My presentation can be subdivided into 4 major parts. Of course, the focus is going to be on the business development of the past year for you as analysts. This is certainly going to be the most interesting part of the presentation. We're going to speak about the most important economic and financial ratios, and of course, we will also take a look at our share and the dividend development, and there we're going to see that we saw a very good development as compared to other capital market players last year. And I will then also try to flesh out these bare numbers with a few non-financial highlights, so that you can get a broader context for these financials. So finally, at the end of this presentation, you'll feel that you have been comprehensively and well informed about Bechtle AG in 2020, not just in terms of financials, but also in terms of all the other topics that we dealt with in the past year. Of course, we'll also take a look at how things go just now. We'll take a look at the framework conditions and give you our targets, but an outlook on the coming year has certainly never been as difficult as this year. So much as a caveat. Let's now come to our business development. You might think it was business as usual if you only looked at the financials. All our ratios developed very positively, and that is something that you are very familiar with, knowing Bechtle. But the past year was quite extraordinary and unusual in many ways, and we're going to focus on that in more detail later. But first of all, let's take a look at sales revenues trends for the group and the individual segments. Revenue growth in the financial year was at 8.3%, and thus fully within the guidance that we had formulated before the pandemic hit us. In organic terms, we grew by 7.1%. But looking at the segments, we see the first distortions caused by the COVID-19 pandemic. The group growth was mainly supported by the segment IT, System House and Managed Services, with growth of 23%. The System House companies in Switzerland and in Austria showed a particularly positive development. The segment IT e-commerce also grew, but not quite at the same level as the system houses. But our companies here in Germany in particular developed very positively at a rate of 17%. Looking at these numbers, one thing becomes clear. Outside the German-speaking region, Germany, Austria, Switzerland, the measures to fight the pandemic were stricter, and the effects on the economy were more tangible than here. And this becomes evident when we look at our numbers as well. We see that when we take a look at the revenue trends in the different regions. In Germany, revenue growth was at 9.7%, and thus almost at pre-crisis level. Revenue growth of 5.9% in our companies abroad is also very satisfying with a view to the macroeconomic environment. But we also see the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic. The numbers at country level match the course of the pandemic in Europe, almost on a one-to-one basis. Amongst others, our companies in France, which is our most important foreign market now, suffered from a comprehensive lockdown in Q2, quite substantially so. When we look at the different quarters, we see the seasonal trends in revenue development. In the first quarter, Bechtle showed top-line growth of 9.3%, also thanks to the high demand for hardware, especially in the month of March. After that, an increase of merely 3.9% was what Q2 brought. Here, the strict lockdowns in many European countries showed their effect. In the second half of the year, the macroeconomic situation improved so that at a level of 7.4%, Bechtle was able to grow much stronger. The fourth quarter in particular was characterized by growth of 11.6% and thus became the strongest quarter of the financial year. Growth was very much characterized and supported by our customer segment in the public sector. We now come to profit developments, and as usual, we start by taking a look at the gross margin. Gross profits developed with a growth of 11.6% and grew faster than the revenue side, and the gross margin at 14.7% is clearly above the previous year's level and came close to the multi-annual average. It was two factors that came into play here. Cost of material at 7.3% increased less, and the product mix with a higher share of so-called periphery products to equip home offices showed a very positive effect. On the other hand, other operating expenses at 14.6% were below the previous year's level. Because of the pandemic, vehicle and travel costs went down. Both effects are closely linked to the pandemic and as such cannot be expected to recur in the same order of magnitude. So after Corona, after COVID-19 is over, we'll probably have to face higher costs again. But the gross margin is just the first indication for profitability. Let's take a look at EBIT. EBIT in the segment of IT System House and Managed Services grew by almost 20% in the year under review. The margin grew by 30 basis points to 4.6%. In this segment, the said cost savings showed a clear effect. In addition, the service share, thanks to the high demand for services around the newly developed home office structures, continued. In the segment of IT e-commerce, the margin increased to 5.0%. The reason for that is the favorable product mix I already mentioned, with a higher share of periphery products and the good development of our own brand, Articona. As you all know, this brand focuses on these periphery products as part of its portfolio. In total, the EBIT margin is thus at 4.8%. COVID-related cost savings add up to around 18 million euros. In addition, we see positive effects from the pandemic on our operating business. The message here is the following. The numbers for 2020 may be very positive indeed, but it will be a challenge to achieve the same high level in 2021. Let's now take a look at the numbers for the full year. In the course of the year, looking at the individual quarters, EBIT showed a similar picture as sales revenues. Q2 showed the weakest development, while we saw a clear recovery in the second half of the year. It is remarkable, though, that in every quarter, also in weak Q2, our EBIT outperformed our sales revenues quarter by quarter, and we could thus improve our margin. And now, at the end of our financials, we come to the operating cash flow, which of course is essential when we look at the 2020 financial year, because at times of crisis, we can still say that cash is king. Operating cash flow for 2020 was clearly above the value of the previous year at 316.3 million euros. In addition to the general good trends that I already mentioned, other non-cash expenses and income had an impact here. Write-downs for trade receivables led to a rise in this field, and in addition, changes in net assets had an effect. In particular, the smaller increase of trade receivables is something that must be factored in here. The outflow of funds went down by 62 million euros year on year. In a year that was characterized by a strong macroeconomic tension and a year in which many analysts and investors worried whether bad debt would burden our profits and our cash flow, we see that such a development can really be called remarkable. And it is good proof of our successful working capital management. Let's now take a look at our headcount. As of the 31st of December 2020, Bechtle had a headcount of 12,180 people, which is equivalent to 6% more than the previous year, or 693 people more than in 2019. We all know how important our employees are for the success of our company, but it has never been as clear as last year. Without their flexibility and their commitment, we wouldn't have been able to adapt to the new framework conditions so quickly and offer our clients tailor-made solutions in a very short period of time. It is all the more gratifying to see that Bechtle could position itself as a reliable and attractive employer. This is the only way for us to win skilled labor for our company every year and thus ensure the success of Bechtle for the future. And with that, we come to our share price development and the dividend. In 2020, our capital markets were quite unimpressed by the COVID-19 pandemic at the end of the day, apart from a clear setback in March 2020. But of course, you are all well aware of that. And this is all the more true for our Bechtle share, which really saw an outstanding development in 2020. Although our shares went downhill together with the market in March, we had hit rock bottom on the 18th of March already, with a closing price of 85.05 euros. As a result, we saw a V-shaped recovery and an upward trend with many all-time highs in the further course of 2020. The annual high was reached on the 27th of November with the price of 188.40 euros, and for a short period of time our market capitalization exceeded the 8 billion euros mark. At the end of the year, the share price was at 178.40 euros, and with growth of 42.5%, our share clearly outperformed the market. In February 2021, our stock came under some pressure, but ever since then we've been quite stable at values at around 150, 160 euros. In this context, we should also take a closer look at our dividend. Our ad hoc information of the 17th of March 2020 on the scrip issue and our press release of this morning already told you that our management and supervisory board will propose to the AGM a dividend of €1.35 per NPV share, equivalent to an increase of the dividend of 12.5%. This is in fact the 11th increase in a row, which is also ample proof of a very reliable dividend policy and an adequate participation of our shareholders in the company's success. Total shareholder return, again, is quite impressive at 43.5% relating to last year. The payout ratio, if this proposal was accepted by the AGM, would be at almost 30%, 29.4% to be precise, and thus almost at the same level as 2020. This is also an indication of stability and reliability in the time of a global crisis. Let's come to the special events of the 2020 financial year that are not financial and that still tell us something about how the company did last year.
It's true, COVID-19 dominated everything, but still, even in 2020, there were some strategic or operative important highlights that are truly worthwhile to be mentioned here. Following now is just a selection of the best bits here. Let's start with an important customer segment in 2020, the public sector. On this slide, you just see as an example some particularly important so-called lighthouse projects with the public sector customers. The business with the public sector customers has developed extremely well across the entire bandwidth of our business in 2020. Of course, it was mainly driven by the high demand due to the necessity to digitize under COVID-19. But we also benefit from our expertise in dealing with the public sector, as well as from our proximity to our customer. Well, for our situation, it might sound rather dramatic or emotional rather, but we were right there when our customers were hit hardest, and we found flexible solutions very quickly so. Keep the lights on was the catchphrase of the hour at Bechtle that really hit home how we saw ourselves in many situations with our customers. Also with a reference to our public sector customers, but also when we look at the technological field, next highlight is very important. At the so-called Einheitsexpo to celebrate the anniversary of German reunification, we at Bechtle were also present. The Baden-Württemberg representation focused on the topic artificial intelligence, and that was a major attraction indeed. Baden-Württemberg represented itself as a future-oriented, innovative federal state with a clear focus on the Cyber Valley Initiative, Europe's biggest research consortium on artificial intelligence. As a main sponsor, Bechtle AG supported Colugo GmbH, a member of Cyber Valley Startup Network, with the technical equipment and the organizational planning and implementation of the entire contribution. Why do I mention this project in particular? Well, it shows that Bechtle more and more opens itself to innovative future technologies. And that's where the next project fits in nicely. The headline, IoT, Internet of Things. Bechtle AG has acquired Dataformers GmbH from Linz. That was the 100th company acquired in our history. With that, Bechtle sets an important milestone to expand the skills around IoT. The expertise and the specific skills and competences of the newly won employees takes Bechtle a major step forward. Dataformers GmbH is an expert in software development and IoT solutions. It's headquartered in Linz and has further sites in Vienna and Eisenstadt. Founded in 2009, the company has 55 employees, amongst them 35 software developers. In fiscal 2019, revenue was 5.5 million euro. Dataformers was one of 3 acquisitions which we realized in 2020. Well, COVID-19 affected the M&A market in 2022, but you can rest assured that Bechtle will remain active in the M&A market in the future too. Another highlight, almost an evergreen at every analyst conference, are the partnerships we have with the major manufacturers. Ladies and gentlemen, partnerships prove themselves in times of crisis in particular. That is something which we've experienced in particular in 2020 with our manufacturing partners. You all know too well that we've always intensively invested in our network in the IT market, our network with OEMs and distributors. The importance of these partnerships can be seen not only from the awards that we gained in 2020 and that are proof positive of our extraordinary technological positioning. The close relationship with our partners and the long and trustful relationships with our partners was one of the reasons why Bechtle, at a time of severe supply bottlenecks, Bechtle was longer able to provide products to our customers. Well, different from other years, I would like to focus this year on one partner in particular. That's Microsoft in particular. In December, there were 2 particularly positive messages in the context of our partnership with Microsoft, because Bechtle is a new member of the Microsoft Intelligent Security Association, MISA. These are special Microsoft partners. This ecosystem initiated by Microsoft combines globally leading software providers and managed security service provider in the field of cybersecurity. That is a truly relevant future topic. Membership in MISA can only be achieved upon invitation by Microsoft and reflects the strong positioning of Bechtle as a provider of comprehensive managed services around the cloud services of the manufacturer, as well as our expertise in the field of security. And Microsoft has granted the status Azure Expert Managed Service Provider to Bechtle. This hallmarks Bechtle as an outstanding partner for the planning, migration, and the operation of cloud services on the Azure platform. And another important customer highlight, because year by year we demonstrate our technological expertise, are our competence days. The last competence day was once again a tremendous success. And at the same time, it was the first time that we had a fully digital, a complete virtual competence day. And we've been able to attract more customers than we did in the past, because there were 3,000 customers and manufacturers, vendors who dialed into the platform and who learned about very different topics linked to the most important and innovative IT solutions available on the market. As regards the acceptance of this event, we had a lot of interesting presentations at the C-level, amongst others by Michael Dell, Antonio Neri, and also Bitkom was represented by Achim Berg. But still, there's nothing we like more than direct customers with customers and partners, and that is why we are planning as early as possible to come back to, well, maybe a hybrid format. Hybrid will have a mix of face-to-face and virtual events. Well, the big topic of sustainability also plays a more and more important role for Bechtle. Sustainability in our business model as trading service provider is not as evident as for other companies who have their own production, for instance. But still, if we look at our fleet of roughly 3,500 passenger cars, we still have a certain lever. So in the past year, we provided the infrastructure prerequisites for further electrification of our fleet. In the midterm, we'll ramp up the 80 charging points we have at the German sites of Bechtle Group and grow them up to 300 in the DACH region. And in addition, since November, we have acquired 50 fully electric VW ID.3. A uniform, efficiently load management, as well as the use of regenerative energies at selected sites, supplement our sustainable mobility strategy. But even our highlights can't be completed without a reference to COVID-19, because Bechtle supports the IT equipment and the operation of IT infrastructures of different COVID vaccination centers within Germany and also in European countries. Our activities range from the supply and setting up of PC and notebooks and periphery devices via the provision of network infrastructure to the support for smooth operation of IT equipment. Well, in economic terms, quite frankly, these projects might not be worthwhile mentioning, but they are a good example of something important, the relevance of IT, not just in fighting the pandemic, but also in more general terms, its relevance for the economy and the society at large. Because one thing became clear to us in 2020, which filled us with some pride and also made us more confident. Bechtle is a company that makes an important contribution to the success of the European economy and the public sector. And by way of conclusion, I'd like to focus on another highlight that underpins once again who is behind our successful development, namely our employees. The past year was an enormous feat for all of us. The different situation, this new situation has challenged us all, both in our private lives as well as in our professional life. Some of us have worked to breaking point and some even beyond that. To honor the outstanding performance of our employees, the board has decided to pay all employees in Germany and abroad a bonus of 500 euro. A sum that is linked with great recognition and great respect in view of the commitment of the team and each and every single employee. Ladies and gentlemen, this takes us to the outlook. I've mentioned it at the very beginning. A forecast is anything but easy in view of the uncertainties that characterize our times. But still, we have certain expectations or targets, to put it in different terms, for the ongoing fiscal year. And let's cast a glance on these goals. What we see right now as a participant in the IT market are tremendous supply bottlenecks. In some product groups or with some manufacturers, there are delivery times of several months. Well, we have to wait and see how quickly the OEMs can eliminate these problems that are mainly linked to scarcity in the semiconductor market and with panels in particular. As Bechtle, despite all these uncertainties, we are quite optimistic with a view to the current year. We want to increase revenues considerably once again, as well as our pre-tax earnings. EBT margin is to reach the level of the previous year. As I've mentioned before, these are truly ambitious goals. In terms of revenue, in particular due to the bottlenecks, and in terms of profit due to the one-off effects of 2020 that I've explained before. But still, we are Bechtle after all, and as always, we set ourselves ambitious targets. So much on our development in 2020 and so much on the outlook on fiscal 2021. Thank you very much for your attention.